The reason I wanted to come in here and look at the training dummy is because they are, with a new patch, going to be removing a samurai ability that I think it's been kind of, I guess it's not super impactful to the rotation now that Samurai's Kenki generation is higher than it once was. But there's been quite a hubbub in the community about this change because they're not replacing it with anything else, and they say they're getting rid of it for reducing button bloat reasons. And I think especially for people that have come from WoW, when we hear that, it tends to send off alarm bells in a lot of people's heads. And I think it is something to be vigilant about. Like, obviously, overly cutting down on button bloat can cause homogenization of jobs, which I don't think we're anywhere close to that being a danger right now in Final Fantasy 14, because all the jobs have a really unique identity. That's something I like about this game. We don't know what all abilities are going to be changed, what all abilities are going to be removed, but they did say that chitin would be removed. And so I came out here to the striking dummy just to talk about it a little bit, because I think it's just one of these little niche, beloved samurai abilities that added some depth and flavor to the job. Maybe not a ton of depth, okay? Like, usually you just cast it right before your Iaijutsu. But it's just a cool thing. Like, it increases the potency of your next weapon skill by 50%. So it felt like, you know, you're winding up to do a big attack right after that. Yeah. And so it also has a really cool animation. I'll show. That's awesome. That's the animation for Kai 10. Let me tell you. It looks so cool. I'm so sad they're getting, why? I'm so sad they're getting rid of this. And they're not replacing it with anything else. And they're not even, like, why not just change what it does? Why would you remove this? It's like, it's iconic. It feels like such an important part of the rotation. It's flavor. It's flavor. So I'm upset about this, even though I've played Samurai a bit in Shadowbringers. My Samurai's still level 80, but it's just one of these things. It's just one of these major important to flavor buttons. Like I said, maybe not the most impactful button in the rotation, but so because of this has stirred up a lot of people being mad and talking about the threat of excessively cutting down on flavor buttons for the sake of like removing button bloat. Now, I think in the live letter they did say that they are looking at a couple of other jobs for cutting down on button bloat too. I think they said Astrologian and Dragoon they are looking at for getting rid of some different buttons. Isn't Midari more iconic? Well, yeah. Midari is definitely more iconic. But chitin, I guess some people won't really care about it or even like miss it. But I liked it. I just thought it was neat. Okay, it wasn't like the most iconic flashy button in the whole rotation, but it's just cool. It was kind of cool. Added some like some variety. So yeah, Astrology I can definitely understand. I think a lot of people are drawn to Astrology though for the fact that it does feel so busy compared to White Mage. Like, it just, if you feel like you have a lot more going on, I tend to prefer playing Astrologian in a dungeon in an expert roulette because I just feel like I have more to do, and like it keeps me more busy, it keeps me more entertained. But there are times for sure when, as someone who's relatively new to playing a healer, it can feel overwhelming. So a little bit of cut down on Astrologian I think would be fine, just depending on what they remove. So Summoner could use some, wait, what? Summoner could use bloat reduction, what? I'm not sure if, are you talking about Endwalker Summoner? Did you hear about what happened to Summoner in Endwalker? Did you? Several FF14 YouTubers and streamers have made videos all unanimously stating that they're against the removal of the skill and worry if it keeps going, they'll remove more and more uniqueness. They also brought up how far Summoner has changed. Yeah, I guess you really can't have a discussion about button bloat reduction and simplifying a job without talking about Summoner. Now, Summoner is a job that, this was the first DPS job that I ever got to max level. I started as a tank player, and then I leveled Summoner because I was always drawn to the aesthetic and the idea of being a Final Fantasy Summoner. And in Shadowbringers, I spent about, I think it literally took me a month to learn the Summoner rotation well, as it was then. And I had been practicing it like every week, a couple of nights a week at the training dummy, like getting it down where it felt like muscle memory, where I felt like pretty confident at what I was doing. And I guess Shadowbringers was a bad time to learn how to do that because of how much it changed. But what people used to always say about previous Summoner was that it took a long time to learn, but then once you got it, once you've learned it, then you're pretty much good. And it can feel really comfy after that. It just had like a high barrier to entry, I guess, because you have to just spend the time to learn what buttons go in what order. But I never thought it was that complicated. It was just long. It was just so long that it took a long time for you to absorb everything that you were supposed to do. Like, I remember the old Summoner was sort of a... It really had a lot of extreme micromanagement throughout the process. I was happy to hear that they removed the dots from Summoner. That was something I never really liked. And traditional dot management didn't really feel that impactful to the flow of Summoner, because if you're just doing your rotation properly, I'm talking about old Summoner, you would naturally refresh your dots. Like, I wasn't even really thinking about my dots most of the time because you had abilities that would automatically refresh your dots. So it wasn't usually that important. I think there was like one point in the rotation where you have to hard cast your dots again. None of that matters. None of that matters now. I don't know why I'm going off on a tangent about the dots. The fact is, I was glad they got rid of dots because personally, I could take it or leave it. I was glad it's gone. I didn't feel like it was that important to the concept and the idea of being a summoner. And so, but with old Summoner, having to manage your dots, your summons, your Ruin 4 charges, and your Ether Flow stacks, you had a lot of different things to manage. You had different resources to manage. And what kind of resource management is there now on New Summoner? I think it probably has the least, and this is a bold statement, I don't know if it's true, of jobs I have played, it feels like it has the least resource management of any job that I've played. And like even Dancer, I had to think about my amount of Esprit I had. I had to think about procs and when I should use those, almost in the same way that you would think about a resource. And of course, Reaper, I'm always planning ahead with like, I have like two or three different resources I have to worry about on Reaper. So I think that losing all of that, it hurt a lot. I think it hurt the feel of the job a lot because, let me try to be more positive. The new Summoner, there's a lot that I really like about it. I think it's better conceptually because it's about adapting to the moment now, where you're summoning Titan if you want to cast spells while you're moving. You summon Garuda if you know the boss is going to stay put, and you summon Ifrit if you know you can charge in or you want to charge in to melee range. So that's all cool. I think everybody universally likes all those ideas and giving a little bit of a different flavor and reasoning for each major summon. But I think that you don't have to really work for it, right? You don't have to work to get your gems to summon the big bads with. And I think that's something that old Summoner did really well. It felt really good to build up and prepare yourself for the big ass Bahamut summon. Like first it felt almost like preparing a ritual where first you go through this Dreadworm trance and you have to accumulate enough Ruin 4 stacks so that you are ready to summon Bahamut. So that when you did it, it felt like, oh, this is a big deal. I did all this prep work beforehand. I went through my trance, I got everything ready, and here's Bahamut, right? That felt very impactful because of the setup. So I felt a lot more invested in the big summon because of the preparation that went into it. And now I think New Summoner doesn't feel like it's building towards anything. It just feels like pressing the buttons. And you just, like I said, you don't have to work for the gems to press the summons, and that it sucks. That's the thing that I really don't like about it. Because I think in general, my favorite jobs in the game are ones that are very simple, but are really good at build-up. Like, the build-up feels good to do. The build-up and the climax. Those are the best jobs, right? In my opinion. Like, I don't like something that's going to be overly busy, that's got too much crap going on. Like, I don't like playing Monk. If it's got too much going on, I got too much to worry about, I get stressed, okay? I don't like that. For me, that just feels like I'm gonna blow a gasket in the middle of a raid trying to figure out mechanics on top of my... But some people love that. It's not for me. I like a simple job, but that builds up very well. Like Dancer, I think, is a good example of that, because if you're trying to optimize Dancer and play Dancer well, you need to think about how many seconds are left on your procs. Maybe not so much anymore. I haven't played it much in Endwalker, but when I played it, I had to think about how much time is left on my procs. Can I use my procs now, or do I need to save them for later? How many seconds until my next dance is going to be cast? And then, you know, technical step always felt like a really good button to press, because you got to get ready for it. You got to make sure that you can press that now. Do your 4 steps. Like, it's a huge amount of damage. So I love that about Dancer. And Reaper, of course. I think Reaper is extremely good at the concept of build-up. That's something that made me fall in love with the job from the beginning. Is that, like, you start out and, like, you build up to the first. The whole job feels like it's designed around this idea of, like, building. Because you get the first resource, and then feeds your avatar a little bit, and then you do some spells. You use that resource to do spells that will make your avatar just like claw at stuff, and you feel like, oh yeah, we're getting into it. And then you use that resource from the clawing attacks to spend them to actually turn into your, like, transform into your avatar. And when you transform, you're like it feels completely different. You're moving really fast, and it's like does a buttload of damage, and it's just like the whole thing starts all over again. It's a really fun, rewarding cycle where when you transform, when you get that big power button of Enshroud and Communio, like, that felt like it mattered. It felt impactful because there was so much, the whole rest of rotation is spent building up to that. And that's something that old Summoner did really well. And that's something that new Summoner, I think, is failing really bad at, even though the new summons look so much better, and then even though conceptually it is so much better. It feels so much better conceptually. It feels more like traditional Final Fantasy Summoner should, but it's missing the build-up. And I think this is the thing. So many summoners I've heard say the same thing. They're saying, you know, it just feels like it's missing a little something. It feels like it's missing something to tie it all together. And I think that's what it is. I really do think that's what it is. The lack of the resource management, lack of building up towards anything. You just get all your gems for free without having to work for it, and so it just feels all the same, feels samey. So it doesn't have to have a lot of buttons to do that, but I think it needs to have a little prep somewhere in there. Do you think summoners will get a build up in the future? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I kind of had a feeling like when they redesigned Summoner, they redesigned Summoner to make like a very basic base level of the job that they could build upon. Now, I think they overdid it, but I wondered if they made like a really simple base framework that they could build upon in later expansions. But, so I think that they will, especially, I mean, they're good at listening to player feedback. They know what people want most of the time, so I think that Summoner will get more of what I'm talking about. But, yeah. It really needed a change. It needed a reduction in the massive amount of buttons that we had before. But it's still missing something. It's still missing some more buttons. I do remember near the end of Shadowbringers, before we knew what would happen with Summoner, we were like, they can't seriously be considering adding another minute or something onto this 2-minute rotation, right? Like, are we going to get another big summon to go on top of tack on to our 2-minute rotation? Like, it started to feel like it was, it would be getting out of hand if they just kept adding, like they added Firebird. Well, what's going to come after this, right? They ended up not doing that, and I think that this is a much better direction, but it's missing the impact. It's missing the impact. What you end up losing the most when there's a reduction in button bloat, what you lose is flavor. You tend to lose some of the job identity. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes they get rid of something that people kind of just forget about, and they realize, well, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal anyway. And sometimes they remove something that you really wish they didn't. Like, but I think a lot of us are looking at this from the perspective of people who played WoW. And WoW really made us all terrified of the phrase "cutting down on button bloat." Like, so many WoW players who switch over Palm Super Team are like, they're just rightfully concerned. God, I remember, like, I suddenly am having a flashback. I remember back when we had talent trees. I was playing a mage, and we had talent trees where you could, like, put some points in one tree and put some points in another tree, and we had the frost fire specs for people, where people were doing frost and fire, like little frost, little fire. So, yes, like, who hurt you? But it's still, here, the big difference is that you have to remember is that Final Fantasy XIV devs actually do listen to what players want. They really do listen to what players want. And they are not going to be bullheaded and stubborn and just do whatever they want to do and just fuck whatever the players want. They're not going to do that. They will do what they think is best, and if a lot of people are super pissed about it and complaining, then they'll change it. We still don't know what the full scope of changes are. This is something I've repeated about 1,000 times since we had the live letter, and we'll know more on Monday when they release the patch notes. So I think people are extremely anxiously awaiting the patch notes. Yeah, I know a lot of Dark Knights are worried that there won't be any other changes beside the change to Walking Dead. I'm also a little worried about that, but there might be more that they didn't tell us about. That's a copium. This is the biggest copium I can tell you right now. Ooh, we don't know everything yet. There's still patch notes, just maybe there's more in the patch notes. It's such a copium.